In this video, we're going to play around with the tuning of our enemies, and I'm going to introduce you the concept of extreme tuning, where we try to find stuff that maybe breaks the game or maybe comes up with a new idea, like these speedy guys speedy slippery guys that I've tuned their speed up to like 15 times what it was before. So let's jump in and get started. Let me start by showing you some recent tweaks that I've done, just so you're not sitting there saying, what the heck? I've been working on my nav mesh. Haven't baked it after my last change, but it's looking much better. Most of these gaps here I've fixed up and gone through there. Pretty happy with how it's been going. Hopefully your nav mesh is feeling pretty good as well. You've locked in all your positioning, etc. I have also dropped in a couple of the assets that I've found from the asset pack. This watermill over here, I've just made it a little bit wider. I haven't put a lot of finesse in just yet. I've plopped it into place so I can see how it feels. Dropped in this barn here. That seemed to be a good place for it. Tied it up, put a little fence in here. So a few things like that. Put in this new sort of churchy type thing. I think it's a church. My player won't really see much except for this big side here because of where the camera is, so I've put it in that position and just generally tied it up a little bit. I've painted my textures on the ground here, repainted the roads just to get a better feel for where it is, and dropped in a fountain, and soon we'll put a little bit of water in the fountain. Not just yet, because in this video we're going to talk about tuning our enemies and generally the concept of extreme tuning. So let me just write that on my whiteboard for you guys that are saying, what did he just say there? Because I know Australians and English as well say the word tuning a little bit different to the North Americans. Extreme tuning. So what I mean by that is, rather than saying, I think this guy should run at a 2, let's try making it a 2, to from time to time try things like saying, I think this guy should run at a 2, what happens if I make it 200? I know that sounds really ridiculous, but sometimes it's through this discovery, this experimentation, that we come up with some really cool things. So let's start, as we normally would, by doing this sensible. And at the moment, if we click play, we can move our character, and we can pretend to attack enemies, although I've got, okay, this fountain, I've dropped in a fountain. It's got some wacky collision there. Let's just nuke the fountain for a second. You aren't serving your purpose at the moment. We'll see if that fixes it. Let me just have a look at my nav mesh. Okay, so it wasn't the fountain's fault. Shouldn't blame him. It was the silly goon who's driving that did not rebake the nav mesh, because, guess where the previous fountain was. Okay, that's pretty easy solved. While that's taking its moment to do that, let's go in and have a look at one of the enemies before I do my run around. Back on the inspector. Now, when it comes to tuning your enemies, tuning your game, any sort of tweaks and trying to get it feeling the way you want it to feel, look at all of the levers and variables that you've got. What are all the things that we can do here? And be very conscious about that, because often people forget they've got way, way, way more at their disposal than they think. So this is looking at the enemy here right from the very start. He got a position. Okay, we've been placing him. So we know that we've done that. That's a part of tuning our game. We place the enemy where we want the enemy. We've also got the number of enemies. So I was doing that in the exercise before. I was duplicating, adding a couple of extra ones to show you the width, how wide we want things in the world. So far we've got 2 levers. We can tweak the position and how many enemies there are. What else? Let's have a look what else we've got here. We've got an animator, so yeah, a little bit of animation type stuff, rigid body, capsule collider. Well, we can make our enemies bigger. We can make them take up a lot more space. At the moment, I don't want to monkey around with this too much, because when we go and scale them up, it does really crazy things to animation, but we could do that. That was my previous approach, speaking, guys. You know what we're going to do? Because you guys are probably sitting there saying, I wonder why we don't do that. So let's just scale up in these axes and make a big fat enemy. Hopefully my nav mesh has finished doing its stuff. Whoa! Okay, I find this funny. It's probably, you wouldn't want to ship this in a game. It's pretty dumb. But just by doing this, we're starting to thinking things like, what would happen if we had an enemy with really long legs? Or what if he did a funny walk? In our game, that's very appropriate, right? The Ministry of Funny Walks or Silly Walks, whatever the Monty Python sketch is. And that could be cool. Looks pretty dumb there, so I'm going to just take it back to the way it was. Normal sort of thing. So scaling, size, that's a thing that we can tune and play around with. We've also got scripts in here. So turn speed, stationary turn speed. That doesn't do a lot. Jump power, that guys don't jump. Gravity modifier, well, we could have them floating. And when you think about floating, oh, maybe we could have birds. I wonder what would happen if we turn the gravity off. We could play around with that. Also, run, leg, cycle, speed. We did a little bit of playing around that with the player character. So run, leg, speed, move, speed, multiplier, sorry, what does that do? Okay, should run faster, huh? Not really. What we're going to do here, actually, is let's find the distance, his attack radius. Let's put that up to 10. Just type in 10 here, so that he's going to follow us around. He should follow us around for a lot longer. Okay, so we can play around with things a bunch now to see what he's doing. Okay, what else can we play with here? So his speed under steering, all the way down here. So this is not doing a lot here. Animation speed multiplier. Let's see what happens there. I find it funny anyway. It's pretty stupid. And, you know, I know you guys aren't, not many of you are making a silly, funny, stupid game, so I'm trying to make sure I don't skew everything in that direction, but just seeing what we can play with here. Let's put that back to around about where it was. I think it was at 1. Yeah, 1. Ground check, we don't need to mess with that. That's just a functional thing. Radius, agent, attack size, radius, height. That's not going to do a ton at the moment. Speed, here we go. This is what I was looking for. Let's pump all this up and see what happens. Woo! now he's slipping and sliding. This is a combination of speed and also the material that's on the ground. So this, actually, you know what? This kind of seems cool. I think I've accidentally found something I like, which is we could have an enemy type that runs at you very fast, and maybe it's slippery. Maybe you're playing. This happens when you're in mud. It's a boss battle, and they're running at you with a spear or a lance or something, and you have to kind of navigate out of the way. So movement speed, and it could be that I turn it up really high, and then I have a guy that's just chasing me, chasing, and we have a level where that's a little bit too fast, and he's chasing me. If he catches me, like, you know, stabs me in 1 kill, but he's pretty easy to do a sidestep, to do a juke. I think the Americans call it in American football. To do a sidestep and get out of the way, but that's a thing. So you know what? I put that down in terms of prototyping. That's a thing we've discovered. Are we going to use it? Maybe, maybe not, but it's a thing. And obviously then we get into, we're not jumping into this just yet, but in the next few videos with Ben, you're going to be working on health, be working on attack, etc. So we'll have hit points, we'll have damage, speed of the enemy, size of the enemy. So these are all these things that you can play around with to make sure that each moment of your game, in the context of designing a game, designing levels, each moment is different. So we come in here, this might be a whole bunch of really fast, underpowered guys. Run, and the next bit we get to a couple of really huge, powerful guys. And then we keep going and keep going. And you can see, just by playing around with some variables, we could have dozens of different enemy types in here, and we haven't introduced different abilities and different spells and all that kind of stuff yet. So, you know, with the tuning of the variables, we can get a whole bunch of stuff in there. I'm going to go back to where I was. The player is doing a little bit of funky behavior here. Might not need to solve it at the moment, but I think it has something to do with his stopping distance here as well. So we'll change the stopping distance down to 0.5 and see what happens there. I just want to get him stopping closer to the mouse cursor is my intended goal. So if I click out here, runs, if I click right next to him, oh yeah, that's a little bit better. It's a little bit of sliding, so some good stuff for Ben to work on there. But yeah, so if we're coming in, fight, and then we have all these kind of fights. Now, the one thing I do just at the moment, I think that's their attack radius, they stop way too easily. That would be the first sensible thing out of all that playing around, where I'd say we need to do that, and I'm going to do that for all of the enemies. So if I take one of my enemies here, and just a note from, I didn't mention this when I was showing you guys what I've been doing, I've tidied everything up, make sure my environment's in the right spot, enemies are in the right spot. Clicking on this guy here, just any old enemy, grab an enemy, and we are going to find his stopping distance is one thing we played around with a little bit. Make that 1.5. Make it, yeah, 1.5 for now. I think we need to get him a bit closer. Speed, I think, needs to be a bit slower, just for now. Just the general enemies need to be a little bit slow. We don't want them sprinting at the player. That's very frustrating. Makes it hard to click on them. So we're doing our sensible part at the moment of stuff we know we need to do. And then the other one was, if I can find it, was their attack radius. We'll put that up to 8, I think. I think if we're close to the player, I want them to come charging at me. We don't have a lot of the attack things to play with at the moment. That's coming shortly, but you can see if I get to there, I stop, and then Once I get to about there, it attacks me, starts running at me. We see these guys down here. Are they on screen? Oh, I can get close-ish. Close-ish. Oh, you know what? I'm big noob. I didn't actually apply that back. So this guy here, we will go and grab him. We'll do it out of play so we know it sticks. Double click and get him within the enemies in here. There he is there. Enemy 18. Good old enemy 18. Now the numbers that we want, that cool, that down to 2. Okay, these have stuck, and I'm going to apply these, back to the prefab. So if we click on this guy here, he should also have attack radius of 8. Excellent, wonderful. And if we were to put in a new guy, let's just do a test on this. So that means I've just gone and changed all the enemies in Ben's scene if he's using enemies. And if I add a new guy, then he's probably going to have the same. Yes. Not probably, definitely. What are we talking about here? Now, let's test out, see how this goes. They all charge at me straight away. When I run away a bunch, and the speed of it, I can come in, pew, pew, I can attack the guy I want. Clicking on them pretty easily without it being too hard to get them. A little bit of wackiness when they kind of slowly stop. That's a small tuning thing. The cosmetics of what's going on here, like the wobble and stuff, don't worry about that just yet. We're wanting to get behavior because we need to start tuning this moment. So we say start at the top and run all the way to the end, and players are having a good time with that challenge. Well, okay, so as soon as I ran in there, they started charging at me. That felt pretty good with that particular screen angle. Coming over this way, oh, that guy's running at me, good. If there's guys milling around, they all start to mob towards me. I like that moment, actually, of 5 guys running at me. This seems like a good amount of distance for most enemies. We'll have some that are kind of the sleepy old Jabba the Hutt guy sitting there. He's going to be like, run at me. That's what he'll be saying, run at me. I don't want to run towards you. That's feeling pretty good. So as Ben starts to implement, or you guys start to implement more of actual combat, we've got this as a point of, a starting point. Now, back to what we were talking about before, now that we've got that sensible starting point for these enemies, so I want you to find something crazy. This is your challenge, to implement at least 2 extreme or crazy or unexpected or unplanned behaviors. And this is just part of prototyping. You don't need to ship this in your final game. I want you to discover something, and if you go off and do this, play around with the tuning variables, see if you can come up with something. I will come back and show you one more idea that I've got in a couple of moments. So pause the video, come up with something crazy, and then come back and join me again. Okay, I want to give you guys a little bit of an idea here. Something totally different to what we're talking about here, tuning the enemies. I have this idea of something extreme, something interesting, something crazy, where, let me see if I can find the player. I was doing this before. I don't know how I would use it. Maybe I'd use it in terms of having a whole mob of guys, but I chucked in a whole bunch of players. Now, you can guess what's going to happen. I'm going to control them all, so I'm going to put in... How many should we put in? Well, if it's going extreme, I'd put in, like, 20, wouldn't I? Maybe you have a party of guys. I know you have standard games where you have parties of 3 or 4 or 5, and you have games, big RTS games, where you have, a whole army of dudes. But in a Diablo-style fixed camera, third-person action RPG, you don't really get this very much, do you? Let's have a look how this goes. Okay, run. Oop, doop, doop, doop. I actually find this really interesting, very cool. And this is the kind of thing you need to do when you're prototyping, throw in a whole bunch of players, and you might think, you know what? What if I made my game where you control a mob that starts out at 10 and your game is over when you get down to 0? So it's like a roguelike with permadeath where you have a whole bunch of guys. And that's the kind of idea that we wouldn't have come up with unless we just chucked a whole bunch of these player characters in, attack, to see what happens. So that's an example of something I came up with. Hope you guys have come up with something cool. If you want to post what you've done on the forum, even if you take a little video or a screenshot, if it's something that's visual, if it's something that is a tuning, then feel free to create a video and show it to us. That would be excellent. I'd love to see what you guys have come up with. So that's it for now, this tuning variable. Well done. You guys are doing fantastic, and I will see you really soon in one of the upcoming videos.